So good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the Climate Jobs Now Summit. My name is Lara Skinner. I'm the Associate Director of the Worker Institute at Cornell. I'm also the Chair of our Labor Leading on Climate initiative. And I want to welcome you on behalf of the Worker Institute at Cornell, the recently launched union-led Climate Jobs New York campaign, and our other partner on this great summit, the Governor's Office, Governor Andrew M. Cuomo. So thank you all for being here. The Worker Institute is a part of Cornell University's ILR school. Our mission is to advance worker rights and collective representation to build a more just, sustainable, and equitable workplace and society. And about 5 years ago today, after Hurricane Sandy hit downstate New York and Hurricane Irene had hit upstate New York, the Worker Institute launched a multi-year research, education, and policy initiative. And we brought together unions from the building trades, from the energy sector, and the transport sector. And we had two goals with this initiative. One was to reposition the labor movement as an engine to tackle the climate crisis. And the other one was to reframe the public debate around climate change to forge an unbreakable link between climate justice, economic justice, and worker protections. After Hurricane Sandy and Irene had hit upstate and downstate New York, it was clear to us that New York State was facing two crises: the climate crisis and a crisis of inequality. And the signs of climate change were clear at that point, but now we're experiencing climate change charged destruction on an almost daily basis, right? We've seen Hurricane Harvey, we've seen Hurricane Maria, we've seen the flooding throughout Asia, we've seen the fires and heat waves that are now hitting California and the West more generally, and much more. And as we learned from Sandy and Irene, these extreme weather events hurt working people, women, people of color first and worst. So if we think about what's happening with the climate crisis, we've increased the Earth's temperature by a couple degrees. Doesn't seem like that much, right? But think about what happens to your body if you have a couple degree fever, right? That's what's happening with the Earth right now. And climate change and its impacts exacerbate existing inequalities, the inequalities that we already have, and the growing inequality of wealth, power, and income allow climate change to intensify. So that we knew if we were going to move quickly enough to tackle the climate crisis and do it in a way that actually reversed inequality in the state by creating many good union jobs, working class communities and unions would have to be at the center of designing and driving this transition to a more sustainable, equitable, and low-carbon economy. So I'm thrilled that we have great leaders here in the room, labor and environmental leaders, our governor, Governor Cuomo, and many other leaders who recognize that the urgency of the climate crisis, the scale and the urgency of this crisis, how working people will be disproportionately impacted by climate change, and the need for New York State to set a bold and ambitious agenda that links the fight against climate change with the fight against growing income inequality of power and wealth. So New York, we believe, can lead the way in massively expanding solar and wind. We can bring energy efficiency retrofits of public schools, public buildings, other buildings to scale. We can massively improve and expand the many public transit systems that we have throughout New York State. Currently, we're installing megawatts of solar and wind. We need to be installing gigawatts of solar and wind, which are 1,000 times bigger. Hopefully, we'll have 7.5 gigawatts of offshore wind installed by 2050. That's my hope, and that we'll have about the majority of our 4,500 public schools around the state retrofitted and installed by solar by 2025. That's the scale of the vision that we're talking about here. So the scale and the intensity of the climate crisis means that we must act swiftly and boldly. And we must respond to this crisis in a way that reverses inequality rather than exacerbates it. That's our goal. So I look forward to today's summit contributing to New York State setting a national as well as an international precedent for how addressing climate change can put people to work in good long-term jobs with good benefits and make the critical public investments that our communities need for our communities to thrive and be more equitable. So I thank you, and I appreciate you being here and look forward to having a great summit. And at this time, I want to welcome up Mario Salento, President of the New York State AFL, to welcome you.
I tried. You know, I always push these things down. They never get to go up. It's when you're 5'7", you know. So, look, first, before I welcome everyone and thank you all for coming, I think we all owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Lara Skinner and to Matt Ryan and to Mike Fishman, who really had this concept all this time ago and brought us now to the precipice of reality. And so on behalf of the 2.5 million members of the state AFL-CIO, I thank each of you for what you've done and where you're going to take us moving forward. Let's hear it for Matt and Mike and for Lara. They really the reason we're here today.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And thanks, everybody, for being here and for your commitment to this important work. So it was 5 years ago that Sandy took place, and as Laura said, when the governor was spending time with cold and miserable New Yorkers in the dark in Sandy, it wasn't just Sandy, and it wasn't just Irene. It was Lee and every other major weather event. In fact, as we speak, the governor is in Puerto Rico with more people that are in deep misery. And so that's why he's not here today. Huh? Speak up, please. Speak up? Can you hear me better now? Okay. So I was just saying that the governor, that is him. He feels what people feel, and he is in Puerto Rico today, as he was with the people of New York after Lee, Sandy, Irene, and other major weather problems. So at Sandy, though, I think the governor told us that the current system was not sustainable. And he wasn't just talking about the need to improve resilience. And he wasn't just talking about the need to reduce emissions. He was talking about affordability, that 1 million New Yorkers having difficulty paying their power bills. He was talking about equity. He was talking about the need to create jobs that were going to come from a transition to an energy economy that really was starting to already take place. And we had to get ahead of these trends as opposed to just having our future handed to us. And that's why he set us out on this plan that we call REV, which is really a plan to really fundamentally reshape the energy system in New York State. So you know the Governor Cuomo, he likes to get stuff done. And so I'm just going to tell you a few things that we've done in the relatively short few years since Sandy. We have a mandate of 50% renewables by 2030. It's not an idea, it's a mandate. We have just completed the largest procurement of renewable energy that the state has ever had in its history. This fund that Laura said was proposed has now been enacted. It's a $5 billion commitment to Clean Energy Fund. It's the largest commitment that New York State has ever made for clean energy. We're going to have a 40% reduction in carbon emissions over 1990 levels by 2030. Our solar industry, which Laura also mentioned and Mario mentioned, has had an 800% growth in the last few years. Offshore wind, we're going to start building one of the largest. At the time it was announced, it was the nation's largest, but now it's the second largest offshore wind project as the first step to 2.4 gigawatts by 2030. The Green Bank has lent almost $500 million to projects that represent over more than $1 billion in projects that would not otherwise have taken place in New York State. Upstate nuclear plants would have otherwise shut down with a huge increase in carbon emissions. And by paying for the carbon benefits, the environmental benefits, those plants have remained open. They would starting to have been closed already this year. But in terms of coal plants, the governor has made a commitment that we'll have no more coal by 2030. You know, I could go on, but this gives you just a partial list of the things that we've done so far, but we are just getting going. Now, nonetheless, we face headwinds from the federal government. We have an administration in Washington that wants to roll back the Clean Power Plan. We have proposals from the Department of Energy to save coal. And I could go on with a long list of things that the administration in Washington wants to do to stop us. Now, on the day that the Trump administration announced the intention to pull out of the Paris Climate Pact, Governor Cuomo, Governor Brown, and Governor Inslee announced the U.S. Climate Alliance on that very day. And this is a pact that's now grown to 14 states and Puerto Rico that represents 40% of the U.S. GDP. And this Climate Alliance, the states are on track to meet their commitments under Paris, and we intend to carry on and accelerate our efforts as a group of states. And I want to make it very clear that under Governor Cuomo, we will not cede any authority or prerogative to the federal government on our clean energy and equity agenda. So we will not back down. We will go forward. So I will now really turn to the main part of this event, which is to have our speakers to give their perspective on actions to stop climate change with efforts to reverse inequality. And so I'd like to. I guess I should give a longer introduction. Am I going to do this?
I can do it if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you can see we're very rehearsed. Please, would you mind?
Okay. Can you turn on this wireless mic? We're good. Okay. Thank you. So yes, thank you, Richard. And I'd like to introduce and welcome our panelists for this opening plenary. So we have Gary LaBarbera here, we have Lisa Dix, we have Angela Tovar, and we have Alicia Barton. So Alicia Barton, I'll start with you, is the president and CEO of NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Alicia was appointed president and CEO of NYSERDA in 2017. And NYSERDA is a public benefit corporation that advances innovative energy solutions to improve New York State's economy and environment. Ms. Barton has held public and private sector leadership roles advancing clean energy projects and companies for over a decade. Immediately prior to her appointment, Ms. Barton served as co-chair of the energy and clean tech practice of Holy Hogue LLP, a global law firm based in Boston, where her practice focused on representation of clean energy companies in emerging market areas such as offshore wind and energy storage. Ms. Barton's other private sector work included serving as chief of operations of the global utility business unit at SunEdison, where she led teams working on utility-scale wind and solar projects. So thank you and welcome, Alicia. And then I'd like to introduce Gary LaBarbera. And he's been recognized already for his leadership in the launch of the union-led Climate Jobs New York campaign. Gary has served since 2009 as president of the Building and Construction Trade Councils of Greater New York, an organization comprising local affiliates of 15 national and international unions, representing 100,000 working men and women in New York City. Welcome, Gary. And then to his right from the audience, we have Lisa Dix. She's the senior New York representative of the Sierra Club. Sierra Club is the nation's largest and most influential grassroots environmental organization with 3 million members and supporters. Currently, Sierra Club history by leading the charge to move away from dirty fossil fuels that cause climate change disruption and move us towards a clean energy economy. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
And then Angela Tovar. And Angela is from The Point, and she directs the community development initiatives at The Point. The Point Community Development Corporation is a nonprofit organization dedicated to youth development and the cultural and economic revitalization of the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx. So thank you all, and we look forward to a great panel. And I'll turn it back over to you, Richard.
All right, thanks, Laura. Can you hear me again? Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to get some questions going, but there will be time to ask some questions, so start thinking about questions that you want to ask. So Angela, let's start with you. What's your perspective on where we are today?
Sure. Thank you very much, Richard. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So as Laura mentioned, my name is Angela. I represent the Point CDC. We're a nonprofit, and we are located in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx. So I just wanted to begin by first applauding the governor's office for some of the work that you're advancing in your leadership in terms of renewable energy. I think that one thing that you said that I just want to highlight is that there's a sense of urgency here. And I really just want to share my perspective from the ground. Hunts Point is an interesting community. It's a community that's both industrial and residential. We have a community of about 13,000 individuals. Most of the residents in Hunts Point live below the poverty line. And we have a wide range of issues because we are next to an industrial community, and we bear the burden of a lot of pollution-producing facilities in our community. We have a lot of public health issues, and we have a high energy burden, and these are just some of the issues that we're trying to address every day. But in addition to that, we have a thriving industry, particularly in the food sector. We have the largest food distribution center in the country. It generates about $5 billion of economic activity for New York City, and it's a job generator. We have about 8,500 direct jobs in the markets. A bulk of those, or some of those jobs, are union jobs, and that's something that we realize that we want to keep. So in our community, some of the work that we're looking at is how do we address some of the long-standing environmental justice issues? But in addition to that, how do we use the clean energy economy to leverage opportunities to do that? So how can we invest in more renewable energy? How can we continue to push the policy forward? I think that our hope is that we can work together to push so that we can be 100% renewable by 2050. And I think that that's something that we would like to pursue, because in doing that, that really provides relief for communities that are climate vulnerable. I didn't mention this, but Hunts Point is actually in a low-lying area as well. So not only do we have industry and food and the residential community, but we're also climate vulnerable to any future floods. So for us, the sense of urgency is very deep. We want to ensure that we can continue to work with the state and with the city leaders on also investing in resiliency infrastructure. And I think that there are a number of climate vulnerable communities throughout New York State that are also looking for the same thing. But we cannot, the other thing that I just want to mention is that we can't do this alone. We rely on partnerships. We are looking, we look to our allies in the labor movement. We have to work with other environmental groups that aren't representative of environmental justice communities, and we have to come together because this has to be a comprehensive solution. For us, it's about undoing years of environmental justice and about creating jobs. But for you all, it's about just transition and ensuring that we don't leave anybody behind. And so we have to really come together and devise policy that makes sense for everybody moving forward.
I've been to one of the food distribution businesses that has a very substantial solar project on that.
Yes, and I think that that's the solution, right? In Hunts Point especially, there's so much rooftop space, right? Because you have these large buildings that are warehouses, right? Distribution centers, and that's the kind of vision that I think that we should advance for. There's solutions out there. So in Hunts Point, we have these huge facilities with thousands of square feet and there's a lot of potential for rooftop solar there. So for us, if they're publicly owned buildings, we want to look at the possibility of creating community shared solar opportunities, especially to address the high energy burden there. But we also want to encourage the private business owners to also invest in renewable energy as well.
Great. Gary, what's your take?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the panel this morning. So I have a couple of takes on this whole thing. And so let me kind of, in short order, put as much as I can in my allotted time. So first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Governor Andrew Cuomo for his leadership in this area, and I thank him for his commitment to this, and I thank all of you for being here as well. Let me first start by making a little bit of an analysis this morning. 10 years ago, you would never see, or you would never imagine, a representative of the Sierra Club sitting shoulder to shoulder with a building trades leader. Okay? That way you wouldn't have seen. The other issue that I want to say is that, when we talk about communities and the importance of good jobs in communities and addressing climate change, you see now more than ever unions in this city, not only in the building trades, but throughout New York City and throughout New York State. And, I want to acknowledge Mario Salento and Vinny Alvarez for their vision and leadership, really engaged with communities and community issues. So I think it's a very positive alliance, and this morning is a great example of that alliance and collaboration. As far as New York State goes and New York City goes, I am a firm believer, and we experienced this in the building trades. I am a firm believer that New York is a place that should lead. New York is looked at, I think, not only nationally, but throughout the world as the epicenter of, obviously, finance, of culture, of many things. And New York is truly a leader, and should be a leader, and should really set the bar. And I think we have an enormous opportunity to do accomplish a couple of things. One is to be in the forefront in the fight against climate change, and to address climate change in New York State first and foremost. And while doing that, also creating a model in which we address inequality in the workplace and we address poverty. And we can do that by this really emerging industry that is coming, and there's no question it's coming. And we know, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about what we know is coming, even as it relates to offshore wind. It's coming, and it's important, and it's imperative. But we can do this in a way that we address energy issues, but also create middle-class careers. And I think the collaboration between community and environmental groups, government, and unions is a wonderful opportunity to do these things. I'd also like to share, something that's in my mind, and we've had this conversation on a phone call, and I'm just going to share it. And it's probably a little New York bias, but I'm going to say it. The offshore wind, I know there's representatives from some deep water here, and I don't know if Statoil's here, but we've met and talked to these providers, and we've had conversations with the governor and with you who are on the panel. I see New York as a real opportunity here, and what I see is this, and what I would love to see become a reality is, we talk about siting offshore wind. We're not just talking about off the shore of New York. We're talking about north of New York and south of New York, right? And there's a map that's been very, very well put together. I see no reason why, in the traditional New York spirit, as you well know, that New York can't really be the regional center of the manufacturing of wind turbines. I think that there is an enormous opportunity. I think logistically it could make sense with our waterways and the ability to barge. And I think that while addressing climate change, we can create an industry in New York State that will provide strong career paths and that will set the model for the rest of the country. And it should be not only obviously with wind, but with solar as well. So I see an enormous opportunity. And I'm going to say this, if there is a governor in this country that can get it done, it is Governor Cuomo. We in the building trades have been the beneficiary of his bold leadership. When we see new airports being built, we see expansions of the Javits Center, which spurs economic development. We see new train halls. We believe that if there's any place in the country that this can get done, and if there's any governor in the country that can get it done, it's the governor of the great state of New York, Andrew Cuomo. So I see this as an enormous opportunity, and I think we should think big, as big as we possibly can. You know, we've had conversations about General Electric and ideas there, which may be a little preliminary for me to speak about, but there is enormous opportunity here. And I think we should lead the way, and I think we can lead the way. And in doing so, as Mario so eloquently and deeply heartfelt, we have to do what we must do, not for ourselves, but for our children and for our grandchildren and their children. This is something that is an obligation that we cannot turn away from. And I think everyone in this room and the communities that are in this room understand that. And I think with this collaboration, we can really set the bar and we can lead the way in this country. So those are my initial thoughts.
So Gary, one quick follow-up before I'm going to turn to Lisa next. So, as you say, this is a big change to have the two of you sit together. But can you talk a little bit more how that has developed in the conversations that you've had with the environmental community?
Right. Well, I think the key component there is historically there's always been this struggle between environmentalists and the trade unions. And I think the essence and the basis of that was there was this focus or this view from trade unions and building trades that environmentalists only cared about one thing, and that was the environment, not about the creation of good union jobs that lead to middle-class careers. Mm-hmm. I think we have both, certainly in New York, I think the relationship through collaboration has evolved. And I think we have found now common ground. We see the need to address climate change. We see an emerging industry that is important to climate change, is important to environmentalist groups. What the environmentalist groups, the Sierra Club, clearly sees, and my dear friend next to me, Alicia, she believes in this, which is so important. They also embrace the idea of, yes, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive of one another. It's not just about addressing environmental issues. It's also about addressing inequality issues and creating good middle class and sustainable careers. So we have sustainable energy and sustainable careers. So I think there is a alignment. Now, I don't profess to speak for other parts of the country, but I can speak for my own reality here, and that is the reality. And I'm sure that this will only grow and expand. So this collaboration, again, can address a number of things, and we've actually found common ground so that we can move forward together, and both of our important issues can be addressed, and we can do it together. And I think that in the world we live in today, and with this critical issue, collaboration, we have to think differently maybe than we've thought in the past. We have to be more open to ideas, and we have to seek solutions and find collaboration, and we're doing that here in New York. And again, I think we lead the way.
So Lisa, it feels a little bit like marriage counseling here. So I'm hoping that you also feel that things are on the right track with your relationship with Gary.
Absolutely.
I hope so, otherwise I'll be devastated.
So what is your perspective?
Well, thank you, Gary. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and then also all of our great partners on Long Island, the Long Island Federation of Labor, the NASA and Suffolk Building and Construction Trades, as well as the IBEW on offshore wind. And so it's been a great
Let's not
pleasure.
forget the iron workers.
And the iron workers, well, they're part of the trades. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
But
Since you
they're
mentioned
a special.
IBEW, gotta mention our brothers and
There's
sisters in the iron.
The iron workers have been a special.
They are
group of
special.
people. Yeah. All right. Was that good?
Yeah, so I can see. I don't think we really need intervention. I think we're okay.
Yeah, we're in good shape.
Yeah, okay.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really, I'm really grateful that I get to come and talk about the vision, the Sierra Club with many of our partners in terms of, really dealing with the climate crisis and where we are as an organization and where we feel like we need to move into this new era, right? And in terms of federal inaction, in terms of, constant rollbacks that we're hearing every day, it is more imperative now than ever that regions and states and local municipalities lead the way to really take us to a new direction and to hold the fort so that we are still meeting our obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to create a better future for our families and our communities. So New York is leading the way. And thankfully, our Northeast region is leading the way. And really, in New York, a lot of local and municipal governments, as well as cities, are really stepping up and saying, we are also going to lead the way. And we have an amazing opportunity, where there is a lack of progress on the federal level. Here in New York, we really have a lot of opportunity to really take the reins and not only move further and on a steady stream toward 100% renewable energy economy for all. It is going to be a massive undertaking, and it is going to rely on all of us working together. Because, not, one group of people or one, set of interests are not going to be able to, move forward in this transition alone. And there are going to be many aspects of this transition. That this transition in which we have to embark on and which we will lead here in New York, thanks to Governor Cuomo, is that we are moving away from a fossil fuel economy. And with that, there are a lot of considerations. There are considerations for what happens with workers and what happens in those communities when we're having those plant closures, right? That we really need to get out ahead and think about a framework for the state that is really going to support workers and support these communities and bring them in to a plan that can make this transition happen in a way and can facilitate this transition where people are not being left behind, where workers are not being left behind. And in the same vein, we need to also be stepping up together and working with our partners in the state, with the agencies and the authorities here in the state to really help set out a vision for not only how this new clean energy economy is going to look and how it is going to make sure that overburdened and underserved communities are getting investments and real economic and job opportunities in their local communities, but also how the clean energy economy is supporting family wage jobs, union jobs, and like Gary said, building careers over the long term. So we have a mandate here in New York for 50% renewable energy by 2030. It is an amazing start, but we also have the great opportunity to move even further than that in terms of really cleaning up our transportation sector and really getting towards 100% vision sector-wide. And how does that look at the local level? How can municipal governments and cities play a role in working with our local unions and our local community organizations on the ground to come together and create these local visions and plans that are really not only making sure that we are creating this economy for the long term, that we are working with communities to ensure that there are real economic development opportunities where there are where we're definitely making those investments in those communities that are overburdened and underserved by climate change and climate disruption, and that we are making investments that are going to create long-term careers over time. And so that's the vision that we all need to be working on together. How are we engaging each other at the local levels, at the state level, to make sure that we are really going to hit our goal here for 2.4 gigawatts of offshore wind? And how we are going to work together to pull together to get ports here, to make sure that we have major supply chain and manufacturing, that New York is truly the hub of this industry. And we can do it because we have power together to do it. And we have power to build this, and we have amazing leadership at the state level through Governor Cuomo to really make it happen and to really make us stand out regionally. So, I could talk about a million other examples of how we can partner together on solar and municipal solar, and with the transportation sector and getting those emissions reductions and really making sure that we do it both at the regional level and we're doing it at the local level, and that we're doing it at the state level through transportation policies that are going to make aggressive reductions in, transportation emissions. And that is going to make all kinds of opportunities in terms of, jobs in, electric buses and manufacturing and new manufacturing, and also, charging stations and building out the charging stations across the state of New York. Those are just some examples. So the Sierra Club really looks forward to working with our brothers and sisters in labor, with local communities and our partners on the ground to make sure that as we're moving to this 100% clean energy economy for all, that it is done in a just and fair way, and that we do this transition together. So thank you.
May I just before I just want to, as Lisa points out, brothers and sisters of labor, and obviously, we have many, many labor organizations here. But again, it's really important, you say the building trades, but in the room, I just look around, I see the operating engineers, I see the plumbers are here, I see the insulators are here, the steam fitters are here, the laborers are here. I mean, this is, if I missed anyone, I apologize. I know we've mentioned IBEW and the ironwork, but I mean, you have a broad breadth of local construction unions in this room talking about climate issues. And I just think that's really significant. And it's important. It's not just the, one or two trades or myself. The trades are very well represented here. We have, international vice presidents here in this room from the insulators, for example. I mean, this has really attracted attention. And here in New York, there was real buy-in. I see John Samuelson, my brother, from the TWU here. I mean, you have broad union support here, and from the CWA. I mean, this is really a tremendous thing. I just wanted to mention that. It really needs to be underscored. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lisa, you have thousands of members in the state of New York. So,
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with them today, given changes in the administration in Washington? Talk about what's going on in your membership and the engagement of your members in the mission that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, so, obviously the Sierra Club, we have 60,000 members in the state of New York, over 3 million members nationwide. And in terms of, just on the energy side, our members have been really working. They work on we're a very multifaceted organization, the Sierra Club, as you probably know if you've worked with us. On the energy side, the major issues that we are really tackling is to really ensure that we are really getting to the implementation phase, right, of the clean energy standard. And what I mean by that is that renewable energy projects are moving forward, that we're doing this in a way that are ensuring that family wage jobs are going to result from these projects. We're working in our local communities to talk to municipalities, to cities, about really making this transition to 100% clean energy, making commitments in each sectors, really asking our local leaders to install solar panels on their municipal buildings. To really think about, can they invest in charging infrastructure and what kinds of zero emissions vehicles, partnering with some of the great programs, at the state with NYSERDA and with NYPA and DEC through their Clean Communities funding to really figure out how we can get these dollars invested in these communities to help make this transition at a really local level. So that's what's going on at the local level, in addition to all of the advocacy at the state and regional levels to making a stronger greenhouse gas initiative through RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, as well as pushing for now a new program that will move forward at the regional level that we're hoping that we're going to build to also really think about how we get transportation emissions down at the regional level, to all kinds of state policies that, from offshore wind to the clean energy standard, and then to also really ensuring that as the state phases out coal by 2020, that we are ensuring that there is a transition framework that is really going to help protect those communities and workers as we move into this clean energy economy. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That's good. You mentioned state policy, so that's a perfect introduction to Alicia. So you're the next key pillar on how all this is going to work.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Is my mic on? Okay. So, wow, this is really a great conversation and really outstanding opportunity with this summit to put a spotlight on this issue, which is front and center for our work at NYSERDA. For those of you that don't know who we are, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, we are, I think, the lead implementing agency in working towards that bold clean energy vision that Richard really set the stage for earlier in teeing up this conversation. So we are on the front lines of the change that is happening. So I'll try and maybe just put a little more color around the work that we're doing to translate the governor's bold vision into reality when it comes to building the clean energy future, and how we also are working hand in hand with that effort to think about how we use this moment of opportunity, a key moment of opportunity for our state, to ensure that we do capture the jobs and economic development opportunity that will come along with this energy transition. So we touched on all of the topics at a high level, but so let me just be a little bit more specific. We talked about large-scale renewables, and Richard mentioned the significant RFP that was issued earlier this year, jointly side by side with by NYSERDA and the New York Power Authority, the largest such solicitation that had ever been undertaken in the state's history to bring large-scale wind and solar energy to market. And what we saw in the response to that was extremely heartening. We saw extremely robust bidder interest in that offering. In the NYSERDA solicitation alone, we saw bids that would equal development of 4,000 megawatts of new clean energy projects if all of those came to market. And so we know that there's an appetite out there for building these projects, and we know that it's going to require a skilled and trained workforce to deliver those projects as well. Lisa touched on some of the on-the-ground implementing work that communities are doing, but the promise is absolutely out there. The demand is there. We're seeing it already. And through our RFPs, we actually include specifically requirements for the bidders to describe how they will facilitate job creation and economic development in New York. That's part of the requirement when they bid on those projects, so we're putting that issue front and center. Solar energy in particular, we're making a lot of progress as well under the governor's $1 billion New York Sun initiative. We've increased already the amount of solar energy in the state by 800% since 2011, and that is a significant indicator of the growth that we expect to continue to see in that area, again, building on that opportunity. Nationally, we know that clean energy is an enormous opportunity for job creation. I saw that the Bureau of Labor Statistics nationally recently indicated that the fastest growing job categories in the country are solar installer and wind turbine technician. And we know that the states that move in that national landscape most aggressively will be the ones that are able to fill that demand. And that's a good segue to offshore wind. I really, Gary, I loved the vision that you painted for what the state can accomplish if we really work hard to try to get this right, to serve not only to fulfill our own nation-leading commitment to 2,400 megawatts of offshore wind by 2030, but also to deliver from New York a regional supply of offshore wind energy. This is really an incredible opportunity for the United States to create an entirely new industry that doesn't exist today. And once again, the states that move forward first in that, like New York, are going to be the ones that see that industry grow up and find a home here. We are working very hard to create the conditions in New York that will lead to that type of partnership and investment. NYSERDA is leading the charge, but working with agencies across state government to issue an offshore wind master plan that will really not only paint a picture of what this energy will mean for New York in terms of environmental benefits and what it will mean for our electric grid, but also what we can accomplish in the arena of job creation and economic development. We're undertaking studies as part of that master plan. Again, it's front and center to understand what resources we have in state now that are poised to deliver for the offshore wind industry, and where can we make strategic investments to further grow that opportunity. So lastly, I'll just say that NYSERDA is also partnering directly with employers and with labor and other partners to provide workforce training opportunities now. And we know the demand for that type of offering is going to grow as well. And we're committed to continuing to work with those partners to deliver training opportunities and on-the-job training and other efforts that will put us in the right position to kind of follow through on the vision that's been laid out by everybody on the panel this morning.
So Alicia, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
What else would you look for in terms of engagement from community groups, from labor, from environmental groups that you're not getting now?
Well, that's a great question. We need a lot of engagement across the board to really educate us about what are the models that are going to work, right? We know that, for example, in the trades, across the board, everybody that Gary mentioned, your workers are now delivering projects in New York. You're delivering projects out of state, and you know what models work for the type of public-private partnerships that
Right.
we're really spearheading at NYSERDA. So we need you to let us know sort of where things are going well, where they're not going so well, and we have really an open door to that conversation. We also need your help looking to the future, as I said, particularly on offshore wind, but also on land-based large-scale wind and solar. We are really at a kind of a critical moment to put the building blocks in place, and we are working hard on that at NYSERDA, but we can't do that on our own. We really need a community conversation like the one being had here today to help us think strategically as a state to deploy our resources in the most effective way.
Okay, great. So I've gotten the message that we're almost out of time, so I'm afraid we're not going to be able to ask any audience questions. But just quickly, final thoughts. So, Angela.
Sure. I guess in closing, I would just like to say that, for an environmental justice community like Hunts Point, some of these solutions really have to put the people that are most impacted by climate change at the forefront. And so for us, some of the solutions that have been talked about already are wonderful, but we just have to make sure that equity is also a part of that conversation. There are communities that have been left behind by some of the traditional market models, and we have to really think strategically about how we can be inclusive and really ensure that vulnerable communities are also have access to new jobs, also have access to ownership, and just really think very in a visionary way about how we can address this through the clean energy economy. Thank you.
By the way, if I could just respond to this, because I think that one of the things that Rev has talked about is harnessing market forces. And one of the reasons why we've talked about harnessing market forces is because we need to have greater speed, so we know that markets move quickly. We know that markets can bring a lot of capital and innovation. But I've also, sometimes what gets lost in that is that we absolutely understand that markets aren't an answer to everything.
Right.
And so, so this is a challenge for people like Alicia and for me in government, because we have to know where markets are going to bring us a good solution and where markets end and where we need another solution.
I'll just be really brief. I really, we've got a really immense task ahead of us, in this 100% clean energy transition for all. And the Sierra Club is really encouraged to be working with all of our brothers and sisters in labor and all of the really important and critical community groups on the ground to be able to do this work together. So.
Well, thank you. Let me just be brief as well. One of the things I do want to address is a comment was just made. This is an opportunity for the unions, again, to further engage with community. We have some very good models now where we actually, it's with community hire, pre-apprentice programs. Again, if we can create this pipeline of middle-class jobs that, are really careers within the building trades, I can tell you, looking around the room, and because we've done this already, we can really create enormous opportunity. And in doing so, again, not just change the lives in terms of climate, but literally change lives in terms of finding a way into that middle class. So again, I think it's just a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so encouraged to hear it, that everyone feels the same way. I will say, the old saying, go big or go home, and that's what we need to do here in New York, is go big. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
I'll just finish by saying that I'm delighted to be part of the conversation on behalf of our entire team at NYSERDA. We are committed to having this conversation with all of the stakeholders that are here today, and we look forward to that engagement and to working together to really follow through on this moment of opportunity that's been teed up so well.
All right, so on the last word, opportunity, I want to thank this panel for a really fantastic conversation, and thank you all again for your work.
Thank you.